Hello, welcome to the Ponderings podcast. This is your host, Milo. And in this episode, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm outside, so there's going to be a lot of background sound. I wanted to sort of take a hiatus for a bit from my Whitehead series. I've noticed myself not being super into it, just not wanting to write an outline and things like that. And I'm pretty sure it's because of the gloomy weather here. It's been pretty cloudy the past couple days and it's cold, but being out in the cold is not as bad as just being stuck inside looking out. I think taking some time to go outside is definitely helpful. That being said, I wanted to read some passages in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I felt that I needed some sort of pick-me-up or like things to live by right now while I'm sort of dealing with the winter blues. Alright, so this first meditation is in book 1. It's passage 12. In Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, he wrote about each person that he knew and that he was thankful for. And that's sort of the main topic of book 1, is just him giving his thanks to his teachers and people that have sort of helped him become the person he is. And I was sort of skimming through, so I've read this book multiple times, listened to it multiple times. It always gives me peace because it's basically his diary. But anyways, I was just kind of skimming through it, and then I was like, wow, that's very relatable. So yeah, passage 12. I'll read this. From Alexander the Platonist. Rarely, and never without essential cause, to say or write to anyone that I am too busy, nor to use a similar excuse, advancing pressure of circumstances, and constant avoidance of the proprieties inherent in our relations to our fellows and contemporaries. So basically what he's saying here is just to never make excuses to see people. Or if you are going to make an excuse, to make sure that it's a good one. He was a sort of a proponent of thinking of the human community as a cosmopolis kind of thing, where we have a duty to the people around us, to our community. And it's not this like you're forced to, play a part and things like that, but it's more like giving back to the community that gives back to you, maintaining relationships. And I feel like this is sort of an aspect in my life where I struggle with a lot. I have a tendency to isolate, especially with COVID happening. A lot of us have been isolating more often than not, because we're, being told to socially distance and, isolate in order to keep others healthy and yourself healthy. But I don't know, there's other ways that one can communicate or get in contact with others. And stay connected. I don't think there's ever a good excuse to not catch up or, stay connected to someone, unless they're no longer good for you in your life, or, you're not good for them, things like that. But I don't know, I found that passage to be very important. Now I'm walking. It's starting to rain a little bit, so I'm trying to find a shelter out here. But yeah, back to Marcus Aurelius. In constant avoidance of the proprieties inherent in our relations to our fellows and contemporaries. In constant avoidance. I definitely, not as much now. There was a point in time where I would avoid a lot, trying to talk to people, and I still do that. There are a few people that I stay in contact each week, but I feel like we should definitely make the time for that, even if it's just once a week or once a month, to sort of stay in contact. With people that we supposedly care about, or that, we say we care about. I used to see friendship differently, where I'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter the distance or the amount of time that we've talked to each other. And in some cases, it doesn't. In some cases, there are some people that are just hard to keep up with, but you eventually always sort of come back and catch up. But, and we can have friends like that. That's totally fine. But I think it's also important to make sure that you have a small group of people that you communicate with on a more regular basis, or make an effort to sort of nurture that like small community of people. 1, 2, especially in times like this where we can't really go outside and be around people, even just not talking to people, just walking around, sitting at a coffee shop, things like that. We can't really do that right now. There are a lot of lockdowns happening again, and restaurants and coffee shops are all only doing delivery or takeout, which is good, because cold weather makes people's immunity more vulnerable to COVID and other things. But I think that's what makes this time especially important, to make sure we're focusing on nurturing our relationships. And of course, I'm not an expert in this. I feel like this is as much or even more for myself than for whoever's listening. And that's why I sort of chose this topic, because I particularly resonate with it. Another thing, this is sort of an update or a more casual podcast than my usual thing, but I keep saying I moved here recently, but I moved here in the middle of the summer, so that was at least like 5 months ago. But I haven't really met anyone new, and it's definitely because of social distancing and COVID, but I know that's not the only reason. I think it's right now a really good excuse for me to avoid the uncomfortable of talking to new people, or of getting to know new people. And I don't have to do it solely like in person. Like this could be something I could do or engage in the internet. There's a lot of communities online. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of anxiety in relation to trying to get to like meet new people or create new relationships or get to know my community. It's also hard because it's hard to know what a community is nowadays. It's mostly people of like-minded sorts or people that are into the same things. You can live in the same town but not really feel a part of it, or there's no sort of community aspect to being in the same environment or place. And I think it's important to have communities with people that are based on, things you like or agree with, or philosophies, or whatever, things that you're into. But I think it's also a nice thing to have community based on where you live, just like knowing people, or I don't know. It's definitely hard to create that in a city, but it's also hard to I think it's also hard to create a sort of authentic community, even if it's like a small town. And what I mean by authentic is like, I don't know, people being themselves and not just scared of being themselves. Like in small towns, it's hard to find people that are different because they're afraid of being themselves, or it's harder to be themselves because they'll be judged. But for cities, there isn't that like community aspect, but you can be yourself in a city. I guess because there isn't that judgment from your community. I guess that's the downfall, or maybe why I avoid community or avoid getting to know people or getting closer to them. That like judgment, that criticism. I don't know. Anyways, making time for community. Right now, I talked to a few people, but I've been pretty consistent with that 1 week thing. And even though it's not anyone new, I think that has helped immensely with my mental health, just keeping in contact with family members or friends once a week, checking in, having a regular person in your life that you can turn to because you've sort of nurtured and built that confidence in that relationship over time. Well, I think that might be all I have to say about community and isolation, and I guess in reference to that quote of Marcus Aurelius. I hope that you all stay safe and healthy. Also, that you are able to stay warm. I hope that this inspires you to contact anyone you've been thinking about, or maybe nurture some relationships that need some more love and more care. I hope that this episode was helpful, or at least sort of insightful. I sort of find these unstructured episodes to be the most difficult for me, only because I feel like I blank out or I don't know what to say. But I feel like it's good practice for me, because sometimes it's hard to make outlines and have so much structure. Sometimes I just want to be able to say some things that's been on my mind, or and be able to articulate that without feeling like I can't. And I feel like in this episode I've articulated something, so I think it's gonna start picking up on the rain soon, so I think I'll end it here. I'll probably start doing some podcasts like this every now and then on just quotes that inspire me, or are some sort of on quotes that get me thinking about things. Alright, well, thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned.